Welcome back to another Alvado video. Now in today's video, we're going to be watching a game played by Prestivant. He is playing on the new patch 13.4. The patch just released earlier yesterday. And basically at the beginning of the patch, there was some weird targeting bugs that people were running into. And so I thought I'd wait a little bit before I make the video because I didn't want to have to explain why units were going a whole bunch of different places. But either way, they fixed the bug. There's lots of massive changes. If you want the TLDR, I made a YouTube short about it, and so I'll probably post that on the screen now. I'm actually not sure if I can do that, but if I can do it, then I will put it on screen somewhere. And if you want, to know more about the patch, my thoughts on a lot of the other stuff, or just high-level players' initial thoughts, then just stay tuned because during downtimes, I'll probably talk more about the patch. I think the biggest thing that people are curious about is how the new Lee Sin works, because previously Cleansing Safeguard was known to be pretty broken. I don't know about you, but I've definitely seen a lot of wild clips of two Lee Sin 1s just winning fights for no reason because they're both unkillable. And so instead of actually nerfing that and changing it so that it's your strongest Lee Sin, they actually left it in the game where you can still field two Lee Sins and they both get the buff from the Cleansing Safeguard, but they just fixed this bug where one of the Lee Sins was refreshing the mana lock. Basically, if you're a unit that shields, then while that shield is up, you're not supposed to be able to gain mana through any sources. That means through taking damage or through autoing or civilian or mana or admin or something like that. But if one of the Lee Sins was casting on a Lee Sin that already had a shield and was mana locked, then it was refreshing the mana lock, and basically it just meant that the Lee Sins were casting a lot more than they should have. And so they fixed that bug, and they think that it's actually okay to have both of the Lee Sins have the benefit from Cleansing Safeguard. And I have seen some games of people still play it. It still seems really strong. So I don't know if maybe they'll change it later, but basically, yeah, that's I think the biggest thing. They obviously changed a lot of small things. And I'll talk more about them throughout the game, but let's get into this game here. He wanted to go for tier off of the first carousel and ended up missing tier because a lot of high-level players have kind of realized that AP is actually strong. Now I don't know if it's actually strong or if it's fake strong, just because it's very early on in the patch. I've still seen a lot of AD builds do very well, but the general consensus is that a lot of AP builds are very powerful, and if you get the right things to happen, then AP is it's pretty strong. They nerf Belveth, they nerf Sure Shots. It only makes sense that a lot of the AP units, are seeing a lot more play and they're a lot stronger. If the AD units that normally, dumpster certain AP comps are a lot weaker, then, it's going to make their time easier. And they definitely buffed several aspects of a lot of different parts of things. But yeah, let's talk more about the game here. So first Augment, I believe he was shown Heart, Electro Charge, and Battle Mage. He just goes for Battle Mage. I think it's probably the best generally good Augment. Heart definitely a strong option, but since he started Sword and he didn't start tier, there's a less likely chance that he's going to get another tier very quickly. So Heart definitely benefits from having that blue buff really early on, and since there's no guarantee that he's going to get that blue buff, he just goes for Battle Mage here. He happens to get this Lux, and here we can talk about one of the first major changes. He builds Gunblade, which still definitely a very strong item, but they did nerf it. It previously had 25% Omnivamp, meaning that it healed, for 25% amount of the damage dealt, and it's now 22% Omnivamp. So, only a 3% nerf, but that's actually more than a 10% nerf if you consider how much less healing you're getting there. Now, he did get dropped Tome from Rugs here, and we can see exactly how he's going to be playing this game. So a lot of people are excited about the new Gadgettine. There's like a lot of like big, you know, buffs to several Gadgettine units. They buff Lulu, they buff Zoe, they buff Nunu. You know, several hero augment buffs. They made it so that you can get several Gadgettine +1s. You can get Gadgettine Crest and Heart now. But even though he's shown Gadgettine there, he knows that this like Spellslinger line can be very strong. And getting the +1 Spellslinger, especially for free when you just like get it through the tome, is, you know, very powerful. And so he's going to like lean this line instead of the Gadgettine line. He didn't really need to tailor his board on 3-1 there. There were a lot of really strong options. They also did a pretty good job at, you know, buffing a lot of like the weaker augments. I think the Sona one was one of the weaker ones. The Sona support one where it gives your team like it gives two of your friendly champions 50 starting mana. They buffed that to give 3 units 50 starting mana, which is like a pretty massive buff. It basically means that if you can get it on the right units, then, you know, essentially 3 units are getting like a blue buff for free, which is, you know, obviously they don't get the benefit of, you know, the mana reduction that blue buff gives, but allowing 3 units to practically like insta-cast is like pretty beneficial. And so normally you would like tailor your board to try and like not get augments like that. But since they had like buffed up a lot of those like bad ones like that, he was kind of just okay with just seeing anything. Of course, you also have like 4 rerolls. And, you know, when he saw the first initial augments, he thinks that the Zoe one is good enough. Zoe's going to be, I mean, sorry, the Annie one was good enough. Annie is going to be on your board for the entire game if you're playing vertical Spellslingers. You really need that Annie is like, it's like a essential frontliner. And so he just goes for, you know, the Annie support augment. Pretty solid augment, gives your whole team 15 AP, and then you get, I think, 45 AP if you're below 50% health. So even if you didn't get the benefit from being below 50% HP, like let's say your units, every single one of your units just like got one shot outside of like tanks, it's still just good. Giving your whole team 15 AP is like pretty solid. Also gets him closer to that Annie 2. He did get an Annie 2 here, but he actually forgot to use his item remover to item remove the tier after he made the Annie. He was just like a little bit too dizzy there. And we can see that he's able to figure out that he used the item remover on this round. It kind of punished him last round, but the thing is, if he would have won last round, the game would have been too easy. So he was just trying to make sure that he could actually like learn something from this game. But yeah, another big thing is that the item pop-off bug is no longer here. They fixed that. You know, a lot of people have been saying that they kind of enjoyed it. Now, I don't really know what my take is on this, because even though I do think obviously it makes the game a lot easier to play, I think you know, making sure that each one of your decisions is impactful, I think is like important for the game. So I think maybe in like some aspects they can make it a thing, but I don't know if they should, you know, keep it in the game entirely. What do you guys think? Did you really enjoy the like item pop-off bug? Let me know. Things to note here, not really too much. You can see that he's still greeting all of Battle Mage, even though it's just Battle Mage 1. I still think it's probably fine. Not too many units that you know, are going to punish you clumping and putting your units on the front line this early, but if you made the decision to kind of like backline some units now, it like wouldn't be the worst. You can see that he goes for Sunfire board over like some other pretty mid augments. I think one of them was like okay, but either way, he doesn't have anti-heal. He doesn't even have a single component that he can use to build an anti-heal item. No belt, no chain, no rod. And so he just goes for Sunfire board there. Pretty solid. You always want to make sure you have anti-heal. And we can see that he does exactly that, and he backs up some of his units, because especially Taliyah, where like the angle really matters. You need to make sure that she's not like in the front line there. She's also really squishy. So you can see like he's fighting against like a Yasuo 3 right now. There's like a good chance if Taliyah's in the front line there, then the Yasuo 3 like one cast just like one taps, especially with, you know, like the residual like shiv damage that his opponent also had there. He does like a few, or like there's a tricky situation that he has where he really wants like a glove or a rod here because he wants to build towards JG. But after counting his items, he's only guaranteed 2 more items for the rest of the game. And if he doesn't get either of those, then he's in like a pretty bad spot. And so he just goes ahead and goes for tier here so that he can get some anti-MR. And he just goes ahead and makes Shiv after rolling down for 1 Echo after going level 8 on 4-5. He does like a pretty neat thing here. He didn't have enough time to slam all of his items before the round started. So I'll show you real quick. Look at the very bottom left of the bench. He has this Jinx. He builds all of his items on the Jinx. He knows exactly which order to place the items so he doesn't screw up. And then he sells the Jinx, and then he already has both of the items built. His bench was like kind of cluttered there as well, so he just thought of the first unit that he could, you know, guarantee he didn't have to hold on to, and then he could just, yeah, build the items on that Jinx there, sell them. And then he chooses to put the Declaw on this Echo and the Shiv on this Taliyah. Now, is this comp broken? They did just buff Taliyah, and, you know, of course, they did buff, like, aspects of Zoe. They didn't actually buff Zoe, but both of Zoe's hero augments are stronger. Sleepy Time now puts to sleep 4 units, and, you know, of course, Zoe is, like, one of these, like, units that you can commonly see on these, like, vertical, on these, like, all AP boards. So, and like inherently that Zoe buff just also kind of just helps out Taliyah in some aspects. They buffed like Echo Carry Augment, which doesn't really do much. They buffed both of Nunu's augments. And then obviously the main thing is they buffed Taliyah's damage. So Taliyah is like a lot stronger here. I think Taliyah was like the unit they buffed the most. They barely buffed her like initial damage, but the explosion damage was like pretty massive. You can see there that he actually had 2 Fiddlesticks. And he chooses to sell them both because he spent like that turn rolling down, and he knows for a fact that he can't actually replace any of the units on his board. The main reason why, you know, these comps are so hard to play in the first place and why they didn't really do very well on the previous patch obviously is because, you know, Bel'Veth might have been like slightly overtuned, but it's also because of the fact that, you know, think about what you need when you're playing around Samir or Bel'Veth. You don't really need anything, especially Bel'Veth. You could put Bel'Veth in like any sort of board. You could play Bel'Veth in the like Aegis frontline. That was the most common one. You could play Bel'Veth in a mech frontline. You could play Bel'Veth in just like a random brawler frontline. There's whole, like, you could play Bel'Veth in a threat frontline. Kogath, Rammus, Zac. It legitimately does not matter which frontline because you do not need to hit those like extra vertical traits to empower Bel'Veth. Whereas units like Taliyah, and then also units kind of like Soraka, you need very specific trait buffs, especially like for like Soraka, and then for Taliyah you just need to, you know, hit those like trait like peaks. You can see he has 6 Spellslinger here. He gets significantly worse if he can only fit in 4. Now it would allow him to, you know, drop maybe this like Lux for some other unit, but at the end of the day, as long as you have like this frontline, the Alistar, Echo, Annie frontline, and then you have Taliyah with as many like Spellslingers as you can fit in between there, then that's like essentially like good enough. You can see here he actually values the Janna more than this Taliyah, because it is Rainy Janna, and with 3 Star Guardian and blue buff, this Taliyah is basically going to insta-cast as soon as she gets spawned in here. Now, what are like some other buffs? I mean, they changed like so many different things. They actually, the 2-cost units, they buffed Malphite, they buffed Fiora. They wanted to buff Malphite just so that, you know, he wasn't as bad as a unit, because they had basically said that Malphite is probably one of the worst units in the game. But I don't necessarily think that Malphite is like that bad. He's just bad because his hero augments both suck. They had nerfed Guardian Spirit over and over again until it was just like kind of mid. And then his carry augment, you just never really want to carry Malphite because his carry augment just makes him do a bunch of damage. But if you're going to give him like a bunch of tank items, then you kind of would rather have him have like an ability that makes him more tanky. So it's just never really worth it. It's just not like worth a hero augment in that regard. So he's just kind of a bad unit just because, yeah, his hero augments both suck. And kind of the same with Fiora. The Fiora support is definitely like a really good one, but it's only really good in like very specific comps, basically just Duelist, and then like some like maybe like some Bel'Veth boards, but it's not even good in like Oxforce or anything like that. Because you'd rather just have AP, because if you're playing around Oxforce, you're probably playing around Zed, whereas you don't really care about healing based off of auto attacks. But yeah, back to like the main point, is this comp good? I definitely think it is good. I mean, he obviously had a Spellslinger +1, which makes the game a lot easier to play, but you can get that through, you know, an augment. And I do think that if you get Spellslinger +1, or if you get like a really early Annie 2, and instead of flexing into like the Gadgettine line, you flex into the Taliyah line because you actually are hitting Taliyah, I think there's like a good chance that, you know, if you hit, yeah, like if you hit like an early Taliyah, then the comp is like easily like one of the strongest comps in the game. And I think one thing to note is that, yeah, he might have pretty, he might have gotten like pretty lucky with the tome and like some of his rolls at certain aspects of the game. But like, take a look at his items. He has Shojin Giant Slayer on a Soraka, I mean on a LeBlanc 2. His Taliyah items are like, I mean, Gunblade is good, but Shiv and Blue Buff are like kind of mid. You probably want, I mean, I don't necessarily think Shojin is like 100 or is like always better than Blue Buff, but you definitely would rather like his comp gets so much better if he has JG, JG Guard Breaker plus like a mana item, and then you have like healing through like an augment preferably. Also, he doesn't have Stand United. This comp becomes like insane with Stand United. I mean, look at how many traits he has. It's really easy to fit so many traits in this comp because of how many traits your like frontline has. Echo, Annie, and Alistar all have triple traits. So it's really easy to pair traits with each one of those units, which is why that's like probably one of the strongest front lines in the game, because if you're playing an Annie, then you want to play an Alistar. We can see that he ends up losing the final fight against someone that kind of just has like a capped underground board. They had like underground since like 2-1. And yeah, I know this like video wasn't super comprehensive, but kind of just wanted to give my thoughts on like aspects of the patch. And you know, I've been watching some high level players games, and I think the general consensus is that AP lines are definitely like a lot better. So hopefully you learned something from this video. Like the video if you liked it, and I'll see you in the next one.